The book is called Wealth is a Mindset. So it starts out by basically saying, I don't care what you make. I don't care how much net worth you have. I don't even care how you spend. You're not, as a human, defined by those numbers. Like, that's the premise of the book, is that I don't care that much about your numbers when we first start. But what I do care about is your money story. Like, what can we learn from your past and your mental health to explain how you think about money today?
You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to start enjoying your life. You can do that much earlier and start living a life that you love and that's true to you. Welcome to Freedom Before FIRE. Using FIRE and life design techniques, we help you create freedom on your way to FIRE instead of waiting until you're retired to do the things that light you up. I'm your host Greg, a FIRE movement and life design enthusiast. If you're itching to get freedom now, then let's do this. Hello, Happy New Year to you and welcome back to another episode. So we've got a bit of a New Year special today and I'm really excited with this one because I got to interview none other than Shang Saavedra from Save My Sense. So Shang, with her hubby, achieved work optional by the age of 31. She has a 15-year career in management consulting and just last year at 37 years old, she quit her 6-figure career to spend more time with her 2 little ones. She started Save My Sense in 2017 to provide financial coaching, focusing mainly on the mindset side of money. She's also the author of the upcoming book, Wealth is a Mindset, Change Your Mind, Change Your Money, which is being released this month. And it's the main thing we wanted to focus on today. So other than the book, she also gives us a bit of a background on her upbringing and how she got to work optional. She also gives us practical tips we can use to save more money. Without further ado, let's head on over to this awesome interview with Shang. I suppose just to give the listeners an idea of whereabouts you are, if they're not sure about you and your story, maybe just give them an idea of, whereabouts in the world are you, what you're working on at the moment, just a brief introduction.
Yeah, this is Shang Saavedra. I'm the founder and creator at Save My Sense, and I currently live in sunny Southern California in the United States.
Awesome. And I'm actually really excited on my end to have you on the show because listeners might not know. Shang and I interacted in the past. She was actually a coach of mine because I followed Shang earlier on back in, I think it was around 2020. I think it was around the pandemic time. Shang, I think I listened to you on a podcast. I think it was Captain Fire or something like that. And then I followed your IG. You had some really cool reels and like sort of blog posts and things like that. I think at the time I was kind of just getting started on like the FIRE journey. In the beginning when you get really excited, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do all these numbers and then, the excitement creeps in and you're going through spreadsheets, you're doing your numbers, you're like, yeah, I could do this. Yeah. And then I think I just needed someone to like sense check things. And I think that's where Shang and her expertise, you've done some financial modeling and you gave me some tips and things like that. And I've kind of just kept those tips going and it's been really helpful, like foundational, just to give the background.
I'm glad to hear it.
Anyway, enough about that. I think one of the key things from your story that would help the listeners is obviously you became work optional at an early age, early 30s, 31, and your husband was 36 or something. So Shang, could you talk us through how you got there? What was the journey like? Just so the guys could get an understanding of the background to that.
Yeah, I would say probably 2 or 3 stages to get there. So growing up was in a very frugal immigrant household. And my parents always emphasized frugality, saving money, and also pursuing a good career. So that was modeled for me. My parents were extremely fortunate to fully fund my college tuition, which is very expensive here in the US. And I got into Harvard. I was the only child, so
Nice.
Everything they spent was on me. I graduated debt-free and I went into management consulting for my career, which is above average pay, really good pay, long hours, and good bonuses. So we combine that together. I didn't have much time to have fun. So naturally, by working so much, I just saved money. And I continued the budgeting, frugal ways of my parents. Then the next phase was I went to business school, University of Chicago Business School. And at this time, I was 25 years old. I met my now husband. Back then we were, friends, and then we started dating. And when we started dating, I noticed that he was just really, really frugal. Like, he was very creative in the different ways that he was able to afford things. He was always able to do fun things, but he got away with like getting it gifted or using points and miles or anything like that. And over time, when we got serious for marriage, we sat down, we talked numbers. And he said, what do you think about the idea of just living off of one income? And I said, for what reason? And he said, well, we do want to become parents. And a lot of mothers in the US face what's called the motherhood penalty. When you become a mother, your career may plateau or you might not get paid maternity leave. And if we learn to live off of just one income, first of all, we can take the financial hit. And then second, you might be able to stay home longer than intended if that's like what you want. So intriguing idea. We got married, put it into motion. And it wasn't like I took to it right away. Like, I actually talk about it in my book that I was really unhappy the first year because I was the one pulling back even more of my spending while living in New York City, while all of my friends who also graduated from business school were living it up because we were all now earning, fantastic 6-figure incomes. And I thought I was just really weird and different, and I was hiding it the entire time. Eventually, I started sharing a little bit about some of my frugal escapades. And that's when a friend said, you remind me of Mr. Money Mustache. Have you read his blog? I was like, who the heck is Mr. Money Mustache? And that's when I discovered there is this concept called FIRE. But all this time, I've just been doing this without FIRE being the goal in my mind. We were just trying to be frugal so that we could be, I guess later the word is work optional. But we were just trying to, make parenthood less difficult. And that's why even though I reached the definition of FIRE, 25 times your expenses than your net worth, at age 31, we didn't have kids yet. So we will continue working, build up more net worth. Now I'm 39 and I have 2 kids. And when I had my second child, I had a health issue. And that was when I decided to quit corporate work full time, give it up, and then just run Save My Sense as, I would say, a very fulfilling kind of part-time work while also being the default parent for my 2 children.
Wow. You summarized it, but there's quite a lot in there. There's quite a lot in there that you've gone through. What would you say are like some of the key challenges on your way? I know you mentioned a few things when you first started. You were, you didn't want to like pay it back. You're like, oh, everyone's going out. And, you're obviously frugal for how many years would you say was like the time it took you guys from when you decided, oh, well, let's do the one income thing to when you actually became sort of work optional? How many years roughly, just to give an idea of like the timeline?
Keep in mind that because both my husband and I, we were already frugal going into marriage. We both contributed 6 figures of net worth at the time that we got married. So
Right.
I got married at age 28. I reached FIRE at age 31. But that's because I already had, ages 21 to 28, 7 years of savings. And then for him, he's 5 years older. So he had 12 years going in as well. Mm-hmm. And we do see our finances as combined. There's no his money. There's no my money. But the difficulty for me to get through this whole mindset of I think I'm missing out or I'm scared I'm missing out, FOMO, I feel like I'm losing all my friends because I'm not doing the fun things they're doing. That took me about a year to really like work through while living in New York.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges I think I heard on your story before is the place that you chose to stay in. I think you described it. It was quite small. And it's quite hard. It was like maybe on upper floor, and there was some sort of rent stabilization. And obviously, that's one of the the big 3 or 4 things to try to cut down on for people. Can you just talk about like your choice of sort of accommodation at the time?
Oh my goodness, you could make a TV show out of that apartment building. I mean, it was so New York. First of all, it was rent stabilized. That means our landlord is very tight fisted and very disorganized. He probably managed 25 buildings. I don't know what he did, but he's very incommunicative, kind of like dismissive kind of landlord. Okay, so we knew that there's not going to be a lot of stuff done to the house. You get what you get and you fix everything else. We lived on the Upper West Side. The apartment is 420 square feet, which I think translates to about 20 square meters, I think.
Wow.
It's technically the 3rd floor, but you have to walk up 4 flights of stairs to get to it. So, and 4 very steep.
Sounds like it needed a ladder or something.
Yeah, and imagine like you're doing this, and because to save money, we bought everything local. Imagine going up the stairs with like 40 pounds of groceries, about 20 kilos of groceries, doing all of that.
Sounds like a workout, Shang.
It is. It is. The kitchen had 2 burners, no dishwasher, a very small sink, no counter space. So for me to even dry dishes, we like essentially balanced a drying rack on the stove that dribbled into the sink. Like, I don't know how we did it, but we did. And then we had like another piece of furniture that doubled as my prep space. It was very, very cramped. It got to the point where I would store some of the items for our kitchen, like kitchen towels, at work, because I looked at my work cubicle. I was like, this is unused space. Let's put some stuff from house at work and then just slowly bring it back. What else? The tenants were all interesting characters. You could hear the walls were paper thin. You can hear my tenants yell on the other side. I had this really nosy tenant who was always on the phone. I think she worked from home before work from home was a thing. So she was always around. And she had this nasal Long Island voice like, hello, how are ya? Good coffee? All right, dear. But you know what? We stuck with it because it saved us so much money. I think relative to our friends, we probably paid half the amount of rent that my friends did at the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that sounds a bit of an adventure. And how long were you doing that? How long were you living there for? Roughly?
No more than 3 years, because then we bought a home to prepare for parenthood. But it was because it was just such a difficult time of my life. It sounds like it felt like 5 years, but really it wasn't that long.
So that's so interesting. Do they say there's big 3 things or big 4, whatever, of expense to try and cut down? So during your sort of this journey, what other 2 or 3 things that helped you accelerate that path? Obviously you mentioned, the high salaries and then the housing thing. Was there anything else that kind of contributed to the acceleration to get you guys to work optional?
In the US, your biggest expenses are taxes, housing, transportation, groceries. So people don't realize taxes is this invisible kind of draining of wealth. And the more money you make in the United States, the higher your tax rate becomes. And so my husband and I sought many different ways to lower our taxable income in legal manners. We weren't trying to skirt our taxes or anything. And there are these accounts in the US that allow you to save on taxes while also investing for your retirement, like the 401k or the IRA. Then I also started a business. I was side hustling as a wedding photographer. And when you have a business, any cost related to the business can also be deducted from your taxable income. So that was really important. Housing, we already talked about, a rent stabilized, fun little apartment. And then transportation. By the fact that we lived in Manhattan, one of the most well-planned cities in the whole world, we did not have a car, whereas now in SoCal I do. In fact, when I look at the true cost of owning a car, Most people think, oh, it's the gas, the oil changes, changing my tires and my license registration fees and my insurance. I'm like, the other hidden cost of the car is that you have to replace your car every several years or so. And that's like an added cost that you have to add on top of your existing car.
Yep.
Now, my husband and I, we are able to buy our cars paid for in cash. But if I have to put a number to it, I would say in general, for every mile you drive, that's $1 of cost. So if I average it out to 1,000 miles driven in a month, that's $1,000. So we didn't have a car. Then the final category is groceries. I learned to cook finally. I did not really know how to cook in my early 20s, but by the time I got married, I had to learn. Many, many mistakes were made. Many very poorly executed recipes have emerged out of my stove. But we did it, and we ate a lot of frozen foods because frozen foods can be very nutritious, but lower cost, especially if you're not buying highly processed food. Like back then, Trader Joe's, one of the store chains in the US, was already coming out with frozen meats that were just frozen. No additives, no seasonings whatsoever. And that's a perfectly fine way to buy your proteins. And then also, both of us did work for employers who would reimburse you for dinner if you worked late. And we worked late a lot at that time because we were both, I think we both averaged, for him, maybe 50 hours of work to 55. And I averaged anywhere between 60 to 80 hours of work a week in management consulting. It can be quite demanding. And so a lot of my meals were paid for as well.
That's amazing. And one of the things I was thinking about is, you mentioned about the food thing and not going out. Like, I know that can be hard because us personally, sometimes if you're in that kind of saving mode, you sometimes feel, I need to one of the things that we love doing is like going out to eat and fight, that kind of thing. And, we know it's expensive, but it's like a nice experience. And sometimes you want to treat yourself. I would have thought that would be quite hard. And I can imagine people thinking, oh, no, I don't want to just stay in all week. And how did you guys find that balance?
It was hard every single day because New York is one of the culinary capitals of the world. And everybody who visits New York wants to hang out and go to an expensive restaurant. But if you're local to New York, you can't be going out to expensive restaurants every week. That's just going to break your budget. I really dug into why I felt so bad every time I turned down an invitation. I was like, is it really that I feel quote unquote poor relative to my friends? And I realized at the end of the day, I was fearful of losing that friendship. What I ultimately psychologically wanted was companionship. I wanted friendship. I wanted to feel validated that I'm a good person, that people want to be around. And then being invited and actually going out to these dinners makes me feel like, oh, I have friends. But then I'm like, then what are other ways that you could have friends that don't involve eating out? I mean, there are other ways. And that's when I realized I can achieve the same feeling of feeling loved and belonging without going to dinner. I can do breakfast, a coffee, so much lower cost. I can, at that time, in New York, there's so many career-oriented events. I can ask my friend, do you want to go hear this CEO talk? Like, let's do that. And a lot of times those events have free food. Or my husband volunteered for a nonprofit, and they go all out. That nonprofit was funded by a billionaire's trust fund. And so when they have events, it's catered food. So it's like, yeah, free fun, free food. Let's go for that. So you just get more creative over time so that you satiate the psychological need, which is I want friendship and companionship, without the high price tag that you thought you assigned to friendship and companionship.
Ooh, mic drop. That's so powerful. It's that reframe. And I know you're all about mindset, and we'll jump onto your book in a bit. But it's such a big thing, just having that mindset shift and just reframe that. Like, there's other ways to do this. And, you don't have to follow what everyone's doing. And I think that is quite difficult in our culture. We're like, we have to, everyone's doing this. The other thing also is, about optics, because a lot of the people going through this journey, their friends and family might not know what they're doing. They're like, well, why are they so like cheap? So I'm doing the air quotes thing. They're so cheap. Like, even me, I get it a lot, actually. I get it here and there from, I always get the little jabs from the family, like, oh yeah, Greg's not going to pay for that, or well, there's always things like that. So I wondered whether, like, how do people deal with that? Like, people around them thinking, oh my gosh, this doesn't go out, doesn't pay for stuff, like, this guy's really boring. Like, how do people deal with that going through their journey?
I think it is so interesting that we are all in a culture that falsely tells our brains that appearances are what they seem. Like, our eyes are actually really deceiving us. We look at somebody who perhaps lives in a big, beautiful house, drives a fancy car, carries nice handbags, and, wears shiny shoes, and we think that person is quote unquote rich. When, for all I could know, they probably fueled all of that with debt. Maybe the house is 90% on the mortgage. Maybe the car is leased. I know a lot of people who don't even own their cars. They just lease the car, and then they probably bought all their clothing on credit card debt. And I'm starting to find out there's a lot of fakeness in that.
Yes.
The people who have true wealth, either you publicly know it because they run, some of the biggest companies in the world, like Elon Musk, or the people who truly have wealth are just relaxed and they have a lot of free time. Like, they can hang out whenever. Like, time freedom is the true mark of somebody who reached early retirement. And that is something that I struggle with now. Is like, I do have all this free time. I want to hang out. I want to see my friends. And my girlfriends are like, sorry, I have work. I'm like, oh, you work. I don't work all that much. So that kidding aside, I would say in the beginning, I was hiding it. I still had a designer handbag. I bought a lot of designer clothing on consignment, to be fair, but I liked to look nice. And I definitely felt really good about my fancy title and my fancy jobs, because I felt like that was the validation that I sought. But over time, I stopped caring what people thought of me. I was like, they don't know what's really going on. And the people who judge you or don't want to have a relationship with you on the basis of your finances, that's not a good friend or even a good family member, because I know it can be family members as well. The love and friendship you have for others should be unconditional. And thankfully, by having done this fire journey at a time when I was young, but also at a time when I'm making a lot of friends, I learned very quickly what a true friend is supposed to look like. And it's not that I test my friends. I don't ever put my friends to a test. But when I notice that a friend perhaps doesn't publicly judge me, but lives in a way that's very different from what I do, and it refuses to do something creative with me. For example, I do have friends who like very nice lifestyles. I don't care how they do it. I don't care what they do with their money. But if I suggest something low cost, I'm like, so grab a coffee or take a walk around the park, and they don't want to do that, then that's not a friendship that I want.
Yeah, and I like that. It's kind of it's a bit of a filter in a way to see your circle and who you're dealing with and who you spend your time with, and you could kind of use that. As you said, yeah, it's not exactly like a out and out test, but you just spot things and you're like, okay.
Yeah, and it's a very easy way, because ultimately, I don't like wasting my time with people who don't really care. So
yeah. So Shang, so Save My Sense. Awesome platform. I love your IG, your the stuff that you're doing on IG. Just really quick one of the memorable reels that I loved. I think it was the time when like crypto and all that kind of stuff was like going crazy, and you had this reel that just cracked me up. You had like, oh, these are the crypto people and they're like partying, and then you had it switched over to you just chilling. I can't remember if you were just sipping a cup of tea or something. You're like, and these are the guys just doing index funds, and I was like, yes. So those little things I love. All like it's really, I loved your humor that you use in your IG. So how did Save My Sense come about?
right around age 31, I started blogging about personal finance, mostly just to document some of the more obscure ways to really, really save money. So I was documenting my recipes. I actually calculated the per serving cost of some of my recipes. And then I was documenting our trips and how at that time we were able to get our trips to a very low cost. Instagram at that time was mostly photography and fashion. There was no creator economy. So I was one of the first people to get on Instagram and do mostly text-based posts, which these days you'll see. But back then, nobody posted as text. And so I definitely felt like I was kind of screaming into the void for quite some time until I started discovering there was a community of people who followed Dave Ramsey in the US, and they used the hashtag. So I followed that. I was like, look, I don't really agree with everything that Dave Ramsey said, but hey, cool, here's a community. Started making some friends. I was also coaching, not really like formally coaching the way that my company does it now, but I was helping individuals learn how to pay off their debt and create a budget. And then I was often teaching the same concept over and over again. So I would take those concepts, write it up as a post, and put it on Instagram. And over time, as Instagram itself changed, the creator economy changed, the formats changed. It went from photography and text to reels, and now it's like really, productions. Like you have to really produce beautiful content to be noticed. I've evolved as well as a business owner over time. And the focus on mental health was always there. Like I was like, it's not just the numbers. Yes, I can do numbers very well, and many other people can too. But I'm the person who really understands that psychology because I went through it. I went through paring back my expenses and not liking it, and then realizing what it linked to from my childhood. And then I have, enough scientific background that I was able to find scientific evidence that a lot of things that I was teaching was right. It is linked to the way that your brain thinks. And so over time, that content just started gelling, started writing courses. I started scaling my coaching team. So Greg, you got to work with just me. These days, most people who get coaching from me start with an assistant coach, and then they have a call with me. It just grew over time, and the book deal came. And so it's just been incredible to kind of ride this new job in my life called a creator. I think my husband one time was filling out some immigration form when we were traveling, and I think he legit put me down as an influencer for my career.
Why not? When you were sort of pushing your content more onto the mindset sort of side of it, did you notice a shift in like an increase in audience, or was that side of it sticking more, and then you sort of gone more into that? Was there like a need in the space for that side of it as well?
Yeah. As the years went by, more and more financial creators got into the space. So there's a ton of creators out there all saying the same things I do about how to pay off debt, how to invest. That side of the messaging is not unique. But to this day, I still don't think a lot of people truly can hit the nail on the head of connecting your childhood and your mental health to how you behave and think about money today. And so that's really where I focus. And then, yes, I also share some of my own life. Another thing that I've noticed is as finance creators make more money from their work on social media, they fall into the trap of feeling that they have to prove it by adopting a more spendy lifestyle. Like you notice that a lot of creators who are either selling B2B, selling to other entrepreneurs, or selling finance, also, for example, tend to flaunt like all the material things that I said are just a mirage, right? They actually flaunt their house and their car and their clothing. I'm like, that's actually kind of the opposite of what we're actually trying to say. And so I think a lot of people are also drawn in by the fact that despite now having multiple millions of net worth, I'm not really living my life all that much more extravagantly. In fact, my husband and I joke, you can tell when our expenses went up because it's when each of our children got born. It's like child one, boom, it went up. Child two, boom, it went up. But otherwise, if we took out the children from our expenses, you couldn't really see a lot of lifestyle inflation.
Awesome. And I want to go more into this mindset piece, but I was thinking maybe we could use your book as a good sort of backdrop to explain this mindset piece. So, Shang, would you like to just quickly introduce this book coming out and explain us through how the mindset piece sort of interlinks throughout the book, please?
The book is called Wealth is a Mindset. So it starts out by basically saying, I don't care what you make. I don't care how much net worth you have. I don't even care how you spend. You're not, as a human, defined by those numbers. Like, that's the premise of the book, is that I don't care that much about your numbers when we first start. But what I do care about is your money story. Like, what can we learn from your past and your mental health to explain how you think about money today? And using examples from my own life and 12 of my coaching clients, I created 3 what I call money problem root causes. So these are things that lead to negative or not so optimal money behaviors in the future. The root causes are called feast and famine, adverse events, scarce immigrant. So let's go through each of these. Feast and famine, you come from a paycheck to paycheck household, most likely low income, but it can vary. And because your parents spent money when they had it, went into debt when they did not, they model for you a lack of planning. Most children from these households, when they grow up, they become impulsive in their money behavior. Adverse events, a little bit more sinister. It's when your parents use money, resources, or love conditionally against you to control you. And so growing up, you don't have a safe basis of identity, of affirmation of who you are as a human being. Children often in these situations are what I would call financially abused, and maybe also actual abuse, emotional abuse. Growing up, these children, when they are adults, they engage in what I call identity-seeking financial behavior. They often just buy something or buy addictively to try to identify themselves. So this is where you might see someone who really buys a lot of luxury, even when they don't have the money, because they feel like that represents a personality that they're trying to exude. Another example might be somebody just really is 100% all about the career because they feel like that career defines who they are. A more nefarious outcome is that some people might be abusing drugs and alcohol and substances because they feel such a lack of self that they might as well drown themselves in a substance. The third root cause, scarce immigrant. Your parents typically immigrated for economic reasons, but oftentimes because they don't have much money in a new country, they're starting from scratch, super frugal, everything. My parents are like that. And they don't want you to suffer and go through the same risk that they had leaving their homeland. So you'll often hear growing up, go to a good school, get a good career, keep it stable, be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And these children, by and large, make good money because they're forced to go to school for, high earning careers, but they avoid risk. Like their parents, they're scared when things are unstable. And so these people tend to not invest in the stock market, or they're more likely to buy real estate. They also tend to not want to jump ship and change jobs rapidly to increase their income. And they also often avoid entrepreneurship or even side hustling because it seems too scary. So I established these root causes. Then I actually use the psychological framework to teach people how to undo all of these negative thoughts in your head. It's called trigger, action, reward. I teach the tool that you use to actually reframe your mind. And then I go through how to pay off debt, how to lower your expenses, how to increase your income, how to negotiate job search, how to side hustle, how to invest. But by teaching you the psychological technique first, then as we go through all of the subsequent financial chapters, I show how this framework, this tool can be used in all of these scenarios to get ahead financially.
Amazing. And so I was smiling there when you mentioned the third one, because that's just me to a T. My parents both from the Philippines. They migrated to UK in the sort of the 80s. I grew up there with my siblings. And yeah, when you were just talking there, I was like, oh yeah, that's like, I was just nodding away to everything you were saying.
I saw.
Because that's so true. Like, yeah, because like, yeah, my parents, they migrated to UK, and that sort of scarcity, things like finding it difficult to like invest or move to different jobs because of that sort of scarcity and being in the safe zone and trying to play it safe. And I think I spent most of my life like just battling those little sort of barriers, sort of picking away at them here and there, like doing crazy things like traveling, going to a different country, doing side hustles, changing jobs. I had to kind of battle my way through them. And yeah, your book would have been awesome. So if I'm just going to use that third root cause as an example, because it's one that I connect with. So someone going through that, maybe the younger me or someone else in that position, how could they use that the trigger?
So let's actually go back to your childhood so I could get a little bit more context. Whenever something difficult or something scary happened in your childhood, what did your parents tell you to do?
What did they tell me to do when something difficult? I think they were more like, retreat, it's okay, like, don't take a risk, just, come back.
Also, they taught you. They taught you to kind of like stay a little hidden, don't raise your hand too much, don't stand out. And do you know whether when your parents left the Philippines, was there political strife or unrest of any kind?
I suppose a little bit, but it was more about the finding a better opportunity.
Yeah,
I think that was more, yeah.
And did your parents succeed financially once they got to the UK, or was there struggle as part of it?
A bit of both, I suppose. Funny because my parents had both sort of typical Filipino careers. Like my dad was a civil engineer, my mum was in the nursing industry. So they found like decent jobs, but I wouldn't say we were like rich or anything. We were like, I suppose, okay.
But you can tell that because your parents chose quote unquote stable jobs, the outcome was positive for them. So you have an example of it working out. So my guess is you're likely triggered when there's anxiety or uncertainty in your life. You're at a crossroads or something you didn't expect to happened. And now you're faced with the decision of, what do I do next? Your brain, when it's in an anxious state, has a hard time thinking. And so your next action, you think back to, okay, what did my parents teach me? What did I observe growing up? You observed and learned that taking the safe way is a sure bet. And then so your action becomes, I'm going to take the safe route. And then your reward is that, okay, the anxiety goes away in your brain. You feel good, but you may have missed out on a larger opportunity of abundance coming your way. So my recommendation for you to change your trigger action reward, the triggers, your anxiety and your instability, that's never going to go away. You're always going to feel that. But my recommendation for you is instead of always retreat to the safe spot, in a controlled environment, try to take a little bit of risk. You don't have to go all the way and take the craziest risk, but take enough of a risk so you know what risk taking feels like. And over time, you develop a better sense of, okay, which risks are worth taking and which ones are not. For example, and because of that new action, your greater reward might actually be more return to your money. My father also drilled it into my head, don't be an entrepreneur, because he had a bad experience where somebody took over a company that he founded, like an underling took it over. He lost the company that way. And so he's like, you can lose a lot in being a founder. And thankfully, he still had his professor job. So I actually, in the time that I took to be an entrepreneur, both as a photographer and now as Save My Sense, I'm very, very hesitant to hire anybody full-time to see a very large swath of my business. I never let anybody see everything. I maintain control and ownership of my business at all times. That's like my way of doing a safe bet, so to speak, a safe risk-taking step. But I also recognize that I am reluctant to make necessary investments into my business when I need to. But the one time I did, and this is back when I was a wedding photographer, I paid $2,000 to attend a photography workshop from a well-renowned photographer. It really paid off. But it was because I went to a photography conference where I sampled the teaching of like 10, 20 other world-renowned photographers. I was like, this guy's actually legit. He actually practices what he preaches. So I did that. And then the last bit of risk-taking I've been doing in recent years is I set a monetary boundary. I was like, how much money are you willing to lose this year to something experimental? So I will admit, I spent $15,000 this year on Save My Sense on something that completely did not work out. And yeah, I'm like kind of mad about it, but it's not devastating me. And so over time, you can also see like my original risk was the $2,000 bet. I made a $15,000 bet. Okay, I think I found my limit. And I can also see what I want to, like, I learned something from it. And that, the attitude of like, just you learn from a failure, so to speak, is probably what allowed me to move out of my scarcity mindset.
Yeah. I empathize with a few of those things that you mentioned as well. Just like when I was like trying to buy my first stock, it took me like months of like researching. And I think I remember I even like messaged you. Was like, I had this sort of table of all the things on one side, all the cons and the pros, and then. But anyway, yes, those things that you're saying, those little solutions and those little tips and tricks to help with that, I think, yeah, those are really, really useful. I think I kind of naturally done those things, but it just took longer time. But I think with your 3-step process is really good to shorten that time so that you can make that decision or go ahead instead of like pondering too long and things like that. So I think that's really good. And is there anything else on the book that you wanted to touch on before we go over to the quick fire question round?
Given that you might have a non-US audience, I will say that towards the end of the book, I do talk about taxes and investing vehicles that is geared towards an American audience. But I think anyone can benefit from the front half of my book. It really is a universal concept that the health of your brain and the development of your brain when you were a child explains a lot of how you behave as an adult towards something as universal as money.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on that. I'm going to pre-order.
Awesome. Yeah, it should be available internationally, primarily through Amazon. It's still in English at this point. We may translate it to Spanish later on, but right now it is mostly just English.
All right. And then before we go over to the quick fire round, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on, anything that I may have missed out that you wanted to sort of cover?
If you are pursuing fire, like Greg and myself when I was younger, do recognize that children can change the calculations. Because the classic definition of 25 times your expenses, well, your expenses are going to go up quite significantly with children. And so even though I said I first reached fire at age 31, that was when it was just me and my husband. Part of the reason why we did continue working was we're like, we want children and they're not going to come, free of charge. So I don't think people should feel frustrated as parents, especially I have parents coming to me now saying, I want to fire. Why is it so dang hard? I'm like, don't blame yourself. Kids got to get fed. It's a whole other person and they need a lot of things and care. And so don't try to compare that, that path that you're on to somebody who's not living the same kind of life that you are.
Yeah. And so just one quick question, because that's quite important. So if you took an example of a couple recently married and they're kind of umming and ahhing or 50-50 about having kids because of like the financial sort of side of it, what would your advice be to them?
Well, I would hope that they discuss children before getting married because disagreement over whether to even have a child can lead to divorce. So I really hope you're not out there still wondering whether your partner wants a child or not. That should be agreed on before marriage. But once you're married, it's not a mystery. You can calculate how much it costs to raise a child. And then you can also say, will I do some of this or not? Not everybody chooses to send their children to fancy private schools. You don't have to put your children into like a really expensive basketball camp or whatnot. And they don't need to learn 5 instruments. And also a very unpredictable part of all of this is your child's physical health, their genetics. You don't know until they come out. So do your best to calculate it, to learn to set aside the money for the child, but also be prepared to move. There are a lot of people in the US where upon having children, they leave the expensive cities, they move to the lower cost suburbs or even lower cost cities to make sure that the finances work.
Yeah, good tips. Okay, Sean, we're going to head over to the quick fire round. I've got 5 questions for you. Just keep your answers short, and I'll jump straight into the first one. So, what freedoms have you experienced in your life so far?
I think the best freedom is not answering to a boss on how much vacation I want to take.
Question number 2. What are 1 or 2 daily habits that have helped you in your life?
Planning your day out the night before. So I always pull up my calendar for the next day, make sure that I know what I'm supposed to do, who I'm supposed to meet with, and I confirm all of that in advance.
Nice. Question number 3. Your most important lesson in life?
Being with the right partner is so important. I would rather you be with the right partner or not be with one than be with the wrong partner.
That's something we could probably add to the, when they say like the big 3 or 4 expenses in life. The right partner.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you recommend 2 or 3 transformational books or any other artistic media that has helped you in your journey?
The book I like the most for my financial journey is The Millionaire Next Door. Great American book that followed frugal millionaires. Second book that really helped me understand scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset is the book Mindset by Dr. Carol Dweck. Fantastic book. And then while we're talking about habits, the third book is about habit forming. It's not about financial habits, just habits in general. It's called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg.
Really good ones. Okay, and then the last one. What's 1 or 2 small things that a listener can do this week if they're kind of starting their journey and they want to kind of get to that sort of work optional stage? What's 1 or 2 small things they could actually just do this week?
I've got 2 challenges for you. 1, do what I call a no spend challenge, but it's not like you force yourself not to spend anything. It's do a no spend challenge where you don't spend on anything frivolous or impulsive to see where your impulses are coming from. I think that's a really great way for you to identify whether your spending is aligned with your goals and your resources. And then second, I challenge you to unfollow 10 bad sources of influence on social media and replace it with 10 positive sources. One of them being myself, Save My Sense on Instagram and Facebook, please. And that's because the information, the media, the words and thoughts that you consume are highly influential as to the outcome of your life. So surround yourself with the good, smart people like me.
Amazing. And that should lead us nicely to our plugs and anything you want to direct the listeners to. So, Shang, take the floor, please. Anything you'd like to plug in?
Yeah. So I'm here to change your money lives 1 cent at a time. The vast majority of my coaching and courses are restricted to US and maybe some Canada. So I encourage everybody else, find me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube under Save My Sense. I'm also on LinkedIn under my name, Shang Saavedra. And I think in the show notes, we'll probably also drop a link to my book, Wealth is a Mindset, on Amazon. It should be available worldwide. So I'm super psyched to hear what people think of it.
Amazing. Yeah, I can't wait either. Thank you for spending your time with us today. If you need more help, you can check out our free guides and services on our website, freedombeforefire.com. If you have a burning question or just want to chat, don't hesitate to drop me an email at greg@freedombeforefire.com. If you found the show useful and want to be notified of future episodes, you can click follow on Spotify, Apple, or the app you're currently using right now. If you think the episode will help a friend or a colleague, feel free to share it with them. And lastly, if you learned just one good thing that will help you in your journey and you want to help us out, please do leave a 5-star rating on your podcast player app. That would help us out loads. Alright, so that was our chat with Shang Saavedra. If you do have any questions for her, please feel free to reach out. Have a great start to the year, and I'll catch you on the next one. And as always, practice gratitude, live life by your design, and do things that make you smile. You got this.